Hello and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. As tensions with Iran remain high, some of the impact is being felt here in Texas. This week, Governor Greg Abbott revealed that Texas has seen an increase of attempted cyber attacks on state agencies. He said those attacks are coming out of Iran and peaked at a rate of about 10,000 per minute.
These attacks from Iran-based entities, as well as other entities across the globe, are going to continue. I think it's very important that everybody be particularly vigilant right now about what may happen out of Iran. And so I think everybody can be secure in their cyberspace or their use of the internet if they very simply practice good hygiene practices.
The hacking is considered a public safety issue since a data breach could compromise sensitive information. Those concerns gained more urgency after a cyber breach of the Texas Department of Agriculture's website. The department confirms a hacker replaced the site with an image of now dead Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. The FBI is investigating. Politics reporter Phil Prazen reached out to a cybersecurity expert to find out more about the breach and the work to keep sites in Texas safe.
The state website quickly returned to normal, but briefly overnight Monday, someone gained access and switched in pro-Iranian imagery. On the image, something called Shield Iran claimed responsibility. News circulated online and state officials launched an investigation.
It's going to be impossible to link this back to the Iranian government. We'll never know whether it was Iranian people in Iran at the direction of the government, whether it was sympathetic people in the U.S. or something in between.
David Springer spent 6 years working counterterrorism and cybersecurity at the Defense Intelligence Agency. He says Iran often works with proxies or sympathetic private groups. The hack was meant to be more of a nuisance, far below stealing information or shutting down internet infrastructure. TDA tells me no personal information was accessed.
But overall, I think there's a very clear message in this, is that we can access your computers, we can do things. It could be worse.
I spoke with leaders of the state's internet provider and cybersecurity agency, the Department of Information Resources. They tell me they're providing support and guidance. However, per Texas law, the TDA website is not one of the agencies the department network monitors. Phil Prazen for State of Texas.
A similar cyber attack hit the website for the Federal Depository Library Program. It was also hacked to display pro-Iranian messages. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security says it is now monitoring that incident. As tensions continue to mount between the U.S. and Iran, we wanted to look closer at some other ways the conflict in the Middle East could affect Texas. Many Texans are in the region. Right now, more than 500 Texas National Guard, Army, and Air Service members are deployed in the Middle East, and that's not to mention the enlisted men and women in national forces stationed at various installations around the region. Meanwhile, Eric Henriksen explores more connections between the Lone Star State and a country 7,000 miles away.
Texas and Iran are two of the biggest oil producers in the world, but there are few oil companies that operate in both regions, and it's all because of Texas law. The state actually forbids itself from forming contracts with any companies that engage in business with Iran. On top of that, each year the state's comptroller, that's this guy, Glenn Hagar, is required to make a list identifying any businesses operating in Texas with ties to Iran. Last year, 23 business operations were identified, most of which are connected to the oil industry and based in either China or India. When it comes to oil, Texas is actually a bigger powerhouse than Iran. In 2018, we produced more than 4.8 million barrels per day, compared to Iran's 4.7 million barrels. By the end of last year, Texas was producing more than 5 million barrels per day.
We have become energy independent in the United States, and I think Texas has led the way towards energy independence.
However, any conflict with Iran will impact oil prices globally, which could hurt the Texas economy. And it's likely that thousands of Texans across the state have an emotional connection to the dispute as well. We have one of the largest Iranian American populations in the country. Between 6 and 10% of Iranian Americans live in Texas. Most of the population is in Houston, but in Austin and San Antonio, there are an estimated 3,000 to 5,000 Iranian Americans living here today.
Many Texans worry that the conflict could grow, putting more troops and others at risk of deadly violence. Texas Congressman Michael McCaul is hearing concerns like that from the people he represents, but he said the president's address to the nation gave him reason for optimism.
Well, I thought it was a very strong speech, and I thought it was very reassuring to the American people. I have a lot of my constituents and people back home that are worried about World War III. And I think the message was, look, we took out a very dangerous actor. Soleimani may not be a household name, but he, over the last 2 decades, has really been the mastermind of terror in the Middle East. And he's killed hundreds of Americans, thousands of individuals in the Middle East, and the orchestrating Hezbollah, wreaking havoc throughout the region. Since 1979, the Ayatollah transformed the region and made it more terror. Having said that, I think what the president, my takeaway was that he's saying, look, let's take a step back. There are no casualties here. We want to engage with NATO, and we want to start a channel of diplomacy with Iran. I've been in the White House with the president on this very topic. Remember, Iran's been very provocative since last October. They shot down 2 U.S. drones. They have killed many in the region, and then they attacked our United States embassy, and that couldn't go without a response. But having said that, I know the president doesn't want to start a war; he wants to end it, and I think this was a signal from the White House to Iran through back channels that we want to start a process of negotiation with you through our NATO alliance partners. Is it the top leader on the Foreign Affairs Committee? I got briefed by the Vice President right after the strike, National Security Advisor, State Department. The big concern was not only is this guy a designated terrorist, and he should have been taken out a long time ago, but the fact is there was an imminent threat in the region to Americans and our military bases. And so to act otherwise, as General Milley, a great Texan, said, would be very negligent and highly culpable. So I think the president had a duty to protect Americans and respond to this threat, and they did, and they stopped the threat from happening. But moving forward, I think what the president's trying to give Iran a sort of face-saving way to get out of this. I personally think what Iran did was to appease their people back home with airstrikes that didn't kill anybody, while at the same time dispersing propaganda that they killed many Americans. And they're sending 2 messages out there. But I do think, I'm hopeful, I'm skeptical of any negotiations with the Iranian regime, but I am hopeful that we can move forward in that direction.
Congressional Democrats were more wary of the president's actions. Several members, including Texan Lloyd Doggett, spoke out on the House floor.
Now, with the assassination, Trump has united those who were once opposing Iran. In Iran, incredible protests. In Iraq, protests against Iranian influence. So after abandoning our Kurdish allies and surrendering that part of the Middle East to our adversaries, Trump has now managed to unite the many people that were favorable to the United States and were questioning the very malicious presence of Iran. I believe that Congress must act, this House must act, to assert its constitutional authority to rein in this out-of-control president.
House members voted Thursday to require President Trump to get congressional approval before using military force against Iran. All Texas Democrats voted for the resolution. All the state's Republicans voted against it.